Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to another Tuesday night with Chosen People Ministries. And we are moving towards the end of the book of Hebrews. And this evening's text, in some ways, is very straightforward and very easy to see and to understand. But the challenge that it throws up for us is huge. So tonight's not a challenge intellectually, I don't think. It's a challenge about application. It's a challenge about allowing God to shape us in a way that lets him use us to impact others. So we're less looking at Old Testament passages, Jesus as a greater high priest, Jesus as a greater sacrifice, and more looking towards a more difficult subject. Some of you may have heard of a man called Theodore Roosevelt. He was he was the president of the United States in the early 1900s, and was invited to return to Harvard to speak to his to the undergraduates there. He went to Harvard, and so schools invite their famous alumni to return and speak. And there he famously said this: nothing in the world that is ever worthwhile having or doing unless it means effort, pain, and difficulty. Nothing in the world is basically worth having or worth doing unless it means effort, pain, and difficulty. And then he goes on, I've never in my life, this is the bit I didn't know, I've never in my life envied a human being who's had an easy life. I've envied a great many people who have led difficult lives and led them well. And I think that's striking it fundamentally what Hebrews chapter 12 is talking about. It's talking about the way to live a life that is sometimes difficult, yet the way that you lead that life is governed, entrusted, and given to God in trust that he'll work out everything for the good. So last week we got to the very end of Hebrews 11, but we didn't really look in any great detail at 11:39, which says, these were all commended for their faith, yet none of them received what they had been promised. So all the people that we've been looking at, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph, Moses, Samuel, David, Jephthah, Samson, all the prophets, loads of unnamed people, some of which were Saul in two, all those people are commended for their faith. And we're told at the beginning of 11 that faith is being sure of what we hope for and certain of what we do not see. And it essentially means these people took God at his word and let that govern the way they lived. And then listen to this thing. So, yet none of them received what had been promised. So it's the sense that the person trusted God despite the fact that they didn't receive the promises. So he'd said, I'm going to make the world right. And these people lived with that vision. And even though they didn't see any sign of it, they lived that way so that they could be close to God, be faithful to him, draw into a relationship with him. And then he says this lovely thing: God had planned something better for us, That's all of us in this Zoom room, and the readers of Hebrews ever since it was written and distributed. God planned something better for us, so that only together with us would they be made perfect. Perfect in this sense it's a sense of wholeness, only that made complete and perfect, finally finished. Only when all the New Testament believers were Jewish and Gentile, every nation, every tribe, every tongue, only when they're united with this wonderful long list of people that we've seen in Hebrews 11, only when they're united is everything finally perfect. You remember that the book of Hebrews began with a promise of something better. We did a lot of that stuff, didn't we, at the very beginning? So these people were commended for their faith, but they didn't receive what they were promised. We got something better. We can see that Jesus is the Messiah. We can see that he's the fulfillment of all those Old Testament prophecies, and we have a more privileged position. As one of the epistles says, even angels seek to look into these things. Therefore, he says, since we're surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, today we were out in Temple Fortune, knocking on doors. 99 out of 100 had mezuzahs on them, and we got chased off a few doors, and but were a lot of no answers. 2 or 3 people that we will be able to go back to and speak to again, which is great. It's hard in those circumstances to imagine yourself surrounded by a great cloud of witnesses. What you feel is vulnerable and tongue-tied and clumsy. And so this text wants to say to us, when you're feeling vulnerable, tongue-tied and clumsy, take a little moment to step back and remember that you're surrounded by this great cloud of witnesses, people that did different things, but with the same ambition. And see how their lives work out. And we look back on their lives in Scripture and we wonder at them. And he wants us to see that it's the same for us. In some ways, it's even better because we've got more information to give us greater certainty. So then, this is what I mean about this text is easy to read, difficult to do. Let's throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles, and let us run the race with perseverance. Yes, all we need to do is throw off everything that hinders us and discard the sin that easily entangles us. Many of us have been Christians for more than 5 or 6 minutes. We've found over the years how difficult it is to throw off the things that hinder us and the sin that entangles us. And that's why the first characteristic that we need as Christians is perseverance. I can confess to you that I've never read Pilgrim's Progress. Please don't send me a copy. Every time I say it, people send me copies. I've got a few copies. I think in Pilgrim's Progress, one of the characters is actually called Perseverance. Perseverance, James says, must finish its work so that you're mature and complete in everything. Perseverance is exactly what we admire in others. That when people persevere, that's what Roosevelt looks at. People who had difficult lives, who persevered, the way they lived made him envious. It's very difficult to learn perseverance if everything is always easy. So purpose, we'll run the race with perseverance, the race that's been marked out for us. When I first read this and thought about it, I was thinking, that's funny. I've never really, in church generally, in Christian circles, competitiveness is frowned upon. I'm often, people say, oh, don't be so competitive, don't make comparisons, blah, blah. But we're called to run a race with perseverance. And a race, the last time I checked, was a competition. I wonder if there is a sense that we'd rather watch the race than run it. I wonder if that's what the exhortation for this section of text. The writer knows that we have a tendency to want to watch the race rather than be in it. I absolutely love the World Cup. I'll be watching much too much of it. And I admire their skill and precision and fitness, but I'm not very skillful, fit, or able to play football. I prefer to watch, and I wonder whether, and that doesn't matter with football, but it matters with our faith. It matters with our relationship to God. It matters as he seeks to use us. And that's what we're being shown here again and again. And so he says, run the race marked out for us. Let us fix our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy set before him endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of God. I don't know if you remember, but we've had this word fix before in Hebrews 3, verse 1, where we're called, therefore, holy brothers who share in the heavenly calling, fix your thoughts on Jesus, the apostle. It's funny to think of Jesus as an apostle, isn't it? He's an apostle because he was a sent one. He was sent by the Father, full of grace and truth. Fix your thoughts on Jesus, the apostle and high priest, whom we confess. He was faithful to the one who appointed him, just as Moses was faithful in all God's house. And the important thing here is to see, fix everything on Jesus. Fix your mind, body, and soul on him. Because he is the one, he's the only one who we can describe as the perfecter of our faith. You see, God had something better planned for us, so that only together with us would they be made perfect. And now he's being described. The reason what we've seen of Jesus is so wonderful is because we can now understand how he is the perfecter of our faith. We understand he who began a good work in us will see it through to completion. And he's like, he loves this badge. He would have a badge. He'd have a badge saying perfecter of the faith, of your faith. And he maybe have a T-shirt with it on. He'd go out and people could come to him and say, what do you mean? He said, oh, I want to perfect you. Because you're never going to manage it. I want to perfect you. That's his heart. His heart is to work with us and perfect us. Make us not perfect, ultimately perfect, but in the process, he's going to, I'm going to wait till I get to discipline before I talk about discipline. So he's going to perfect us, and he's joyful. He says, for the joy set before him, he endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of God. It's sort of, he's going on it's very much the idea of a journey. Jesus can see that he's going on a journey And the first stop is the cross and the shame of that. But the final destination is the throne of God. And Hebrews has already told us that the Son, in the beginning of Hebrews, verse 1-3, chapter 1, verse 3, the Son is the exact radiance of God's glory and the exact representation of his being, sustaining all things by his powerful word. After he had provided purifications for sins, he sat down at the right hand of the Majesty in heaven, and so he became superior to the angels, as his name he inherited is superior to theirs. And then Hebrews goes through that long kind of majestic description of just how incredible this Son is. So we're shown, so as what Jesus did is he looked to the Father for his eternal destination, and that gave him strength. And that is exactly what the epistles in the New Testament are always doing. They're always, Matthew as well, he's always talking about the kingdom of God, the kingdom of God, the kingdom of God is near. When you enter, if you want to enter into the kingdom of God, cut off your hand, pluck out your eye, whatever you need to do to get in, get in. Because these writers can see how wonderful that's going to be. And this long-term eschatological vision is what allows you to get through trials in a way that's revolutionary compared to your peers towards other unbelievers. Consider him who endured such opposition from sinful men, so that you will not grow weary and lose heart. It's a beautiful illustration of so many of us who sincerely want to serve the Lord and be in his will, and sometimes find ourselves growing weary and losing heart. Whilst other Christians maybe are breezing in and out, Sunday morning service, that's enough for them, maybe the midweek Bible study, and they feel totally relaxed. But others are consumed by trying to explore different acts and not satisfied with what relationship we've got and what understanding we have. And we can get to the point where we grow weary and lose heart. One of the translations was for lose heart was emotionally worn out. Have you ever felt emotionally worn out? I think if you're a human being, it's inevitable that you will at times feel emotionally worn out. And what's the answer to that? The answer is to consider Jesus, how he endured such opposition from some sinful men, that whatever we're facing will seem far less serious, far less difficult. And then he pushes us just a little bit, doesn't he? He says, in your struggle against sin, you've not yet resisted to the point of shedding blood. This is coming from the God who shed his blood to make atonement for you. He's not asking anything from us that he hasn't willingly done himself. I thought of Luke, Jesus's description in Luke in the Garden of Gethsemane of him not just his shedding blood in the beatings and the crucifixion, but shedding blood in the intensity of his prayers in the garden when he was entirely alone. And I love the Matthew 11, come to me, all you who are weary and heavy laden and burdened, and I will give you rest for your soul. My yoke is easy, my burden is light. And it seems to me that maybe Hebrews is hinting that we often misunderstand that it's our struggle against sin that is so exhausting. And that's something that we can't escape it, and we can only defeat it in him and through him. And the writer of Hebrews then wants to draw on Old Testament biblical wisdom, the book of Proverbs. He says, and you have forgotten the word of encouragement that addresses you as sons. It's more like saying to somebody that you love, that's got themselves in a bit of a state, and you're really kind to them, and you say, just don't you remember how much I love you? I'm here. We'll get through this. Don't think that your circumstances are unknown to me. My son, do not make light of the Lord's discipline, and do not lose heart when he rebukes you, because the Lord disciplines those he loves and punishes everyone he accepts as a son. So now he's adding to this idea of perseverance, of running a race with the finish line in sight and keeping on going. And remember what I was saying about that we have a tendency to want to watch the race from the sidelines rather than be in the race. Don't mistake watching Ronaldo to be some form of football training. It's not. You have to get out there and persevere in training to run the race and finish it. And we've got the greatest coach that ever lived. Better than Darren Southgate. Sorry about the football, I can't get it out of my head now. Better than Alf Ramsey or whoever else, football coach, whatever kind of coach, he's the greatest coach ever to live. And he says, if you're experiencing difficulty, understand that that's the way that the Lord is disciplining you. It's the discipline of sticking with the divine during earthly difficulty. It's the thing that we're looking at here is being a disciple means sticking with the divine in earthly difficulty. Because the first thing that Proverbs wants to say to us is that sons get disciplined. And discipline in most normal people does produce this response of losing heart, doesn't it? I was really trying. I was really trying. Does sort of bring that out in us. And so he says, don't lose heart. I'm disciplining you because I love you. As I punish you, it proves that I've accepted you as a son. It's rather like I was in a hospital having blood tests and had a CT scan. You know, you put yourself into the hands of the medical profession, and they poke and they prise and they make you hold your arm up and do this and inject things in you, and it's painful. And they ask you lots of really penetrative questions that you don't want to answer. but they're doing it. The fact they're doing it proves you're a patient of theirs in their care. And his discipline and his punishment prove that we are more than a patient. We're his family. And this relationship between the Father and the Son is not like a relationship. I don't want you to think of that in a human sense. I want you to think of that in the relationship with God the Father and God the Son, the perfect relationship between Father and Son. So he says now, endure hardship as a discipline. God is treating you as sons. For what son is not disciplined by his father? See how often he's going to repeat this word discipline. It's ridiculous. So he says, if you're not disciplined, there is again, and everyone undergoes discipline, yes, again, then you're illegitimate children and not true sons. Remember that Roosevelt envied people who had difficult lives but lived them well. The Lord disciplines us so that we will become true sons, in the sense, so you've got this balance between the illegitimate son and the true son. The true son is like his father, the illegitimate son is not. That's the nature. And everything that God allows to happen to us, he allows it in order to develop and grow us. Moreover, we all had human fathers who disciplined us and we respected them for it. Well, maybe we could come back to that, whether that's been our experience or not. I think maybe that's a bit idealistic. But we can certainly all say that we would hope that a father's discipline, we would hope for it, that it would be a good thing. How much more should we submit to the Father of our spirits and live? If we can understand the necessity for human discipline, then how much more should we understand the need for divine discipline? See, God, the Father of our spirits, wants to discipline us so that we might live. Our fathers disciplined for a short while as they thought best. And goodness, all the parents, put your hand up if you're a parent who's got discipline right with their kids. Oh dear, yes, exactly. Oh, okay, two people are confident. We'll have to get their kids to see whether that's true or not. I'm very confident that I've made a mess of disciplining my kids. At the time, I thought I was doing the right thing, but I look back and I see, oh, that was wrong and this was wrong. But thankfully, God is nothing like us. He only ever gets it right. And those of us who have the privilege of being parents can definitely say, sometimes you do stuff that's right with your kids, and you see the outworking of it as in time, and you think, wow, that's really, I don't know, my kids might say one or two things over 18, 19 years that I probably did that was helpful. But I'm really proud of those things. And imagine a father that just only ever did that, only ever did those good things. Good, and I mean good things, not in the sense of them being nice or easy, but that they produce something good out of them. And look what it says. Our fathers did what they thought best, but God disciplines us for our good, that we may share in his holiness. Why does God want us to share in his holiness? Well, I think you can be forgiven for skimming around the text in Hebrews, and you'll find somewhere that it says, without holiness, no one will see the Lord. God's purpose in disciplining us is that we might see him more clearly. You only have to look down to Hebrews 12:14 to see that holiness is the key to seeing the Lord. And so it's I find it fascinating that it's in discipline that we share in his holiness. In being in difficulty, difficulty is the pathway to holiness. it's not difficulty in a sense. It's our response to difficulty that allows God to work in us to knock the hard corners off us, to soften our hearts, to change our character, to help us to see him more clearly and how to serve him more clearly in the world that he's put us in. And then this is a great encouragement, verse 11. No discipline seems present at the time, but painful. That's it, isn't it? Don't expect the pain, but remember, no pain, no gain. That was that's in the 70s or the 80s with the aerobics. Those people who used to bounce around with leg warmers on, saying, "No pain, no gain." They probably, if I was going to the gym now, they might still be saying it, I don't know. But no pain, no gain. The pain comes later on, however, it produces a harvest of righteousness and peace for those who are trained by it. It's spiritual pain training. And it produces two things: righteousness and peace. And don't think of peace as peace and quiet, like finally the kids have gone to sleep, finally the neighbors have stopped playing their music, finally the carnival in the road has stopped and I can get some peace. It's not that. It's wholeness. It's this shalom word. So he makes us whole, people of integrity and people of righteousness. And as our righteousness, integrity grows, so we're more like God, more holy, and therefore we can see God more clearly. It's hard work, isn't it? He's expecting a great deal of us, I think. And perhaps my problem is not that I think he expects a great deal of us, but I underestimate what he's given us. I underestimate his goodness, and so the work that he seems to be asking me to do is far greater than I imagine must be necessary. Therefore, strengthen your feeble arms and weak knees, make level paths for your feet, so that the lame may not be disabled, but rather healed. His aim is, after teaching us to persevere and to endure and to be disciplined, now we're in the rehab center. We're in the spiritual rehab center where he wants to heal us. So I don't know if you ever watched those documentaries on war heroes that get blown up and have to learn to walk again or use their arms again, or even all sorts of different functions. The physiotherapist is there to make feeble arms and weak knees strong. Jesus wants the lame to be healed, doesn't he? That's what we see him doing. And most famously, I suppose, many famously, but beautiful at the gate, leaping and jumping and praising God. That this process has an end game, which is that we would not be disabled, but rather healed. He's not just the perfect priest; he's the perfect rehab guy. I've never been. Well, I shouldn't say. So far, I've not been in any kind of rehab. Some of you may be surprised to learn that. Some of you may have actually had like a hip replacement and been in the rehab process. And the desire, you would hope, of the person walking alongside you is to encourage you to do the exercises so that you get better and stronger and fitter. And that's what he wants for us, stronger and fitter Christians, to be stronger, more able to naturally respond like the people that we've seen in chapter 11. And so he says, make every effort to live in peace with all men and to be holy, for without holiness, no one will see the Lord. This is the next verse is the next few verses. I don't really have time without Fiona giving me a little note in the chat telling me that I've run out of time to talk. So I think I'm going to kind of wind up at this this clear statement that we're called to make every effort to live in peace with all men, in integrity, to be holy, and without holiness no one sees the Lord. Living in peace with all men. I was thinking just about my neighbors today. I spoke to I locked myself out, so I needed to get my keys from my neighbors, and my kids had not returned the keys from one neighbor, so I had to go to the other neighbor and get the keys. Anyway, it meant I had to talk to all my neighbors at great length so that it didn't look like I was just getting my keys. And even though everyone knows that's exactly what was going on. But it's interesting when you hear your neighbors talking about other people, what they say. And I think it's one of the key ways we can be different. It is to be positive about people. To especially in our little local communities, to be the person that never has a bad word to say about anybody. It seems to be like a harmless thing, but it's a great thing. If someone can say of a Christian, I don't believe a word they say, I think Jesus is fairy tale, but I tell you that man never has anything bad to say about anybody. That's quite a testimony to the work that perseverance, endurance, and discipline has produced in that person, in order that they might become holy, not only to draw closer to God, but to bring holiness closer to their neighbors. See to it that no one misses the grace of God, and that no bitter root grows up to cause trouble and defile many. Don't let the fact that Jesus has done it all mean that you do nothing. I think that's what it's saying. And it's warning in particular that bitterness, which often I can fry an egg downstairs. So I don't know, we've skimmed through the discipleship process of Hebrews 12. And all I want you to see that is that sticking with the divine in earthly difficulty is the way that God has ordained for us to become more like him, in order that others around us might see him and be drawn to him and join us in this great mission to show and to tell the God who loves all and wants to see everything restored. And as big as that vision can be in our minds, will help us through these earthly trials, these sins and difficulties that so easily entangle us. So I hope that's been helpful. Jesus, it's supposed to be encouragement for the weary. Don't give up. In other areas of Hebrews, he said that you don't give up on your hope or your faith. Your confidence will be richly rewarded. And I want to remind you that no ear has heard, no eye has seen the wonders that God has prepared for those who trust him and follow his commands. So I hope it's been useful. I hope that you've seen a little bit more of what's going on. And I hope that the next time someone with you're in difficulty, or someone you love is in difficulty, that this will be able to shape how you respond and how you support and how you comfort and how you show compassion to others. Because all of these things are promised to us in this harvest of righteousness and peace that we get from this disciplining of God. Amen.